Welcome to another's Actor's Take, coming to you from the Captain's Lounge studio right here in beautiful uptown Longmont. We have some new faces and we have some old faces with us today. First, let me introduce my guests. To my right, Beth Anderson.
Hi.
Rick Landrum. Scott McCoppin. And Brandy McGeer.
Hi.
I, of course, am Nigel Aves, your host. Because we've got a couple of new faces, let's just spend a couple of minutes and we'll let them do a little bit more of an in-depth introduction. Beth, why don't you start off on this?
Well, as you said, my name is Beth Anderson. I've lived in Longmont my whole life. I got into acting in 1981, probably. Did my first show with Longmont Theater Company about that time, and I've performed along the Front Range from Denver to Fort Collins since then, and various productions.
Wonderful. And you're a singer as well as an actor, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
Because I do remember you have got quite a good voice.
Thank you.
Are those seagulls still flying over the White Cliffs of Dover?
They are.
Excellent. Scott, why don't you give us a quick introduction?
I'm Scott McCoppin, and I got started in theater. When I was a kid, I always watched television instead of movies. I wasn't one of those movie kids. I was a TV kid, but I was influenced by the voices and the faces I saw on television. Rather than be a detective or a cowboy or a superhero, I wanted to be a comedian like Red Skelton or Jackie Gleason. They were my favorites. So when I was in third grade, they asked me to draw a picture of what I wanted to be, and I drew a picture of a stage with curtains and lights, and I didn't know how to draw a picture of Red Skelton, so I took a red crayon and drew a skeleton. And I wrote Red Skeleton underneath, and that was what I wanted to be when I grew up.
That's great.
So you actually wanted to be on the comedic side of it?
I wanted to make people laugh. I really enjoyed.
So that's why we worked together on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
That's right.
That hilarious show that we worked on.
Well, there were a few laugh lines in that.
That is true. That is true. Well, thanks very much. Welcome to our group. You know, as I said before, we're very, very informal. Kick back, say whatever you need to say. So an opening question here, and we can sort of meld these together. This is not necessarily representing the particular show, but what would you consider to be your best acting role? What would you consider to be your worst acting role? Rick, do you want to grab this one?
What should I start with?
Either.
I think that probably Larry Smith in The Raft of the Medusa is probably my best acting role. And it was not a joyful show if you're familiar with it at all. It's a HIV/AIDS support group, and my character is actually a reporter pretending to be HIV positive, and just really grittiness to it. That was, it's one of those roles that you go off stage and I would just sit against the wall and try to shake that character off of me.
It was very emotionally draining.
Very, very much so. At the end of the show, the lights would go down, and there was generally audible weeping from the audience.
Yeah.
So.
That's when you know that you've really done a good job.
Yeah.
Strangely.
Right.
From an actor's perspective.
Yes.
What about worse roles? Something where you're on stage and you're sitting there, standing there, going, "What the am I doing here?"
I don't remember the theater company down in Denver, but I was a stand-in or a understudy for a part in a play called Pack of Lies, and it's a Cold War story about a couple in Canada who their really good friends turn out to be Russian spies. And so the government comes in and they say they want to watch The Neighborhood, and that's what they tell this couple, but they're really watching their friends across the street, and so they they're lying to the friends across the street, and they're lying to the daughter, and everybody's lying to each other. And at any rate, I did a couple of performances having only really rehearsed twice.
Ooh.
So it was, walking the tightrope, and I got to hand it to my stage partners who really saved things several times. But, just really not having had the time to prepare.
Because things like that, the audience doesn't know this. And you always think it's reflecting badly on yourself, even though you're actually doing incredibly good work, all things considered. So yeah, very, very difficult. Beth, how about you?
Best acting experience was Little Shop of Horrors with the Longmont Theater Company. I auditioned, and I really wanted only to be in the trio of the backup singers. And I had never really thought of myself as being an Audrey type. And Leanna Huey cast me as Audrey, and I was shocked. But it was a great role because it really made me I think it was a time when I, really got to create something that was really far away from who I am, and I just, had an excellent experience doing that. And then I think worst times in shows for me come when things aren't well prepared.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we're in community theater, people get other things going in their life, and they can't really do the volunteer job that they meant to do, or somebody isn't pulling their weight, not maybe on stage, but behind the scenes. And I think those are really tough experiences. That helps you as you go along to know what you're going to audition for, or what you're not going to, maybe a company that you're not going to audition for, or certain people that you want to work with or don't.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Scott?
Well, I'd have to say my favorite role was Charles Condoman in Blythe's Spirit, just because I liked the character so much. I identified with him, I felt for him, I sympathized with him, and he was somebody that I would enjoy spending an evening with of my time. So when the role was finished, I felt as though I was saying goodbye to someone I had just made a good friend with, and then also because I was working with actors that I knew and that I was familiar with, and that I liked, who were all friends of mine, and it was a cast that bonded very well. The director was someone I got along with and had worked with many times before, Debbie Zarek.
Okay.
And so that was probably the best time I had, but there have been a lot of good times. All of the shows have been fun, and all of the roles I've done have been a unique experience, and something that has always been, I've always looked for a challenge to take on something that is out of my type, out of my range. But there was something very comfortable about being in Charles's skin that I liked.
You just liked it, felt comfortable.
Yes, I felt
Just fitted like a glove.
It did. It was like a kid skin glove. And there haven't been a lot of really bad experiences in theater for me. There have been shows that I've enjoyed more than others, simply because maybe a cast was a little cliquish backstage, or a director had a few bad habits. But I can't say that I have ever really had an experience that I just came off feeling horrible about. I've always enjoyed myself, and I've always learned from everything I've done. And that's really a criteria for me, is how much fun I am going to have in a show, rather than how much they're paying me, because usually they're not paying me anything. And I've never aspired to work professionally or to be to make it my career.
So tell me, Scott, I believe you're in Beats.
Yes, I'm appearing in Beats with the Moon Theater Company. It's at the Rialto Theater in Loveland, directed by Kathleen Grumman and written by Rick Payden. And Rick is a local playwright from Berthoud. The play is actually set in Berthoud during World War II, the 1940s, and it's about the POW camp that was in Greeley and the prisoners of war who came out to work in the fields to pick the beets because they didn't have enough able-bodied men to work in the fields. They were all off fighting the war, which was a source of some controversy at the time. Rick has taken that bit of history and worked it into a little bit of a love story. I play the farmer, Fred Hunt, who is a little bit cantankerous, and he doesn't like the idea of
So typecasting.
soldiers, yes, working his and he has a daughter. So it becomes a little bit of the story of the German POW and the farmer's daughter. But it's a very important play because it has a lot of history, a lot of local history, references to local landmarks, and I think it has a very important theme for our time and for all times about the way we treat each other and the way we regard our
Yes.
enemies.
Yes. Actually, I know Rick very, very well. Rick and myself go back years and years and years and years. And I actually read the show before it was even performed once.
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely. It's a beautifully written show. He
is.
he
The
really
writing
put
is-
his all into it, and it's just wonderful.
Yeah.
Because we had the same sort of thing happen in the south of England, in all the agricultural counties in Britain. All the men were, of course, overseas fighting. And so all the German POWs would work on the local farms. And I actually, back when I was 18 or 19, I went out with the daughter of one of those POWs.
Really?
He enjoyed living there so much, he stayed.
He stayed.
As a lot of them did.
I think a lot of them stayed around here too, and actually that happened all over the United States as well. And Rick has also written a version for Nebraska called Wheat, and a version for Kansas called Corn.
Wow.
As I understand. So
Nice.
he's trying to get those produced, but I would really encourage everyone to come and see it because I think it's a very important show.
Yes.
It opens March 31st, and it runs April 1st and 2nd. It's only one weekend, 4 shows, 3 days. So we have a Friday evening, 2 shows on Saturday, and a Sunday matinee,
Wonderful.
and that's all. So get your tickets now.
Okay, thanks for cluing us in on that
Thank you
one,
for
Scott.
letting me plug
Excellent,
my
excellent,
show.
Excellent, yes. No, Rick does tremendous work, and you do tremendous acting. So spend your money, folks. Head to Loveland. Brandy.
I think probably my worst and best was the first one I did for Longmont Theater Company, which was Lorraine in The Man Who Came to Dinner. Not because the production was bad. I enjoyed all the people that I was with. I've been very fortunate that I really haven't had a bad experience with cast and crew. But for me personally, I was in not a great spot. I was having a lot of anxiety issues, and oddly enough, it was my first role as kind of that 40s bombshell, which I tended to get cast as since then, which I really enjoy because in my life I'm not really that 40s bombshell. I'm crawling around on the floor with my patients and those kind of things. So that's been fun, but
I hate to interrupt. Brandy is a vet. You have to understand why she's crawling around the floor with her
but
patients.
I've had patients, yes. Actually, yes. In my real life, I'm a veterinarian, so I'm very not glamorous and bombshellish.
I thought we better put a little star next to
Very
that.
good point. Very good point. So I think that role was wonderful because it brought out that bombshell fun costumes. For me personally, I was in not a great spot. I was having a lot of anxiety issues. I remember backstage before going on that first night thinking, oh my God, I just want to leave. I have no idea what I'm going to say. Oddly enough, ended up winning a local tarot award for that show. So it shows you, even though you may not be in the right space in your head for a role, I guess that's what we do. We act. We get through it, and
We
it
act and go
turns
out
out
there.
well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's funny actually because from what Rick was saying about the first show that he talked about, for me it's the same role for my best and the thing that I hated doing the most, and that was Mr. Ruckley and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And Scott, your acting in that was absolutely dynamite.
Thank you.
It should be in your top 5 at least.
It was.
The whole crew did an incredible job.
That was another emotionally challenging
Show.
Very draining.
And that's the point I was going to make. Being Mr. Ruckley, with just the one line, for intercourse them all, you spend the whole show crucified up against the wall, or acting as the basketball hoop, or acting as the altar cross. So the show's about 2 hours long, and I'm on stage for about an hour and a half. I've had a lobotomy. So I'm there drooling and all the rest of it. And one of the things that Debbie did, which was excellent, a couple of nurses had auditioned, and she actually had them as stage nurses. And they were real nurses at the United Longmont Hospital. So they were going around and they were spoon feeding me with yogurt and just letting it dribble down and all the rest of it. And I couldn't focus on anything. And I'm literally just there in a mind of my own. And it's the hardest acting I've ever done, and it's the most satisfying acting I've ever done. Why is it the worst? Because I spent an hour and a half thinking, we did this to people. We turned people into these vegetables, and we did it on purpose for no real reason. They may have had a real reason, but really, it's one of those things that should never have happened to people. So that, to me, that's why it was the best and the worst. Anyway, let's get on to something a bit more cheerful. Is there a role out there that you have always wanted to do? A role that you've always wanted to grab and just give it your all? Beth?
Yes, I would love to do the role of the baker's wife in Into the Woods. However, I think I'm a little long in the tooth to be doing that anymore. So it's sort of one of those, dang, I didn't get to do that, but, you know.
Never say never, Beth.
No.
Maybe they'll have the geriatric version. I can do it then.
Scott?
Well, I don't usually think about roles that I'd like to do. It's usually the next role that comes along is my dream role. But I've been thinking about it in preparation for this interview, and I've always enjoyed. I really enjoyed playing Roosevelt in Annie and affecting a historical figure that someone is familiar with. So if you don't get it right, people will know it. And I would like to do that again. And one that I would like to play would be Lyndon Johnson. I just saw, well, lately Ed Cranston appeared in that as Lyndon Johnson. And that's a character that I think I could do. It was one of the characters that I was imitating when I was a kid and he was president. I always did imitations of political figures, and I've always had an interest in politics. But that's I think I'm the right age and the right physical type for that role, and I would like to tackle someone like Johnson, a very complicated and
Yes.
In-depth historical figure like that.
Nice. Nice. Brandy?
I really want to play somebody evil, like a villainous
Oh.
kind of thing.
I'm the
But
same.
again, I agree with Scott. I mean, any role is great, and they all bring out a fun part. But
I've never had the chance to do
Yeah.
the ultimate evil role, and
Yeah.
it's something I've always wanted to do, is
Yep.
just be pure evil on
yep,
stage.
I do kind of want to be the villainous and.
I've known a few directors that have succeeded in doing that, but
Yeah.
so are there any shows coming up where you think you can make your dream come true?
I don't know. I haven't really looked that deep into it yet, but again, I'm always happy with any role
Yeah.
that they
Yeah.
bless me with. But I think it would be fun to step away because again, I've done a lot of the bombshelly stuff, which is great. I enjoy that. It's not a horrible way to get typecast, I guess. but a villainous would be fantastic. So I think of that show Once Upon a Time or whatever that's on TV, and the mayor, that she's just fantastic. The Snow White type character.
Okay, I don't think I've seen that show. But Rick?
That's funny. Speaking of typecasting, I've been a Nazi in Cabaret, The Sound of Music, the musical comedy Murders of 1940.
Right, you do that bombshell now.
Is this telling you
Yes,
something?
La Casa Full. Any role in that show. Does opera count?
Absolutely.
I'd love to sing Figaro.
Wow.
He's a baritone,
Yes.
but I don't have any formal opera training.
I can even
been
see
in the
you
chorus
doing-
a couple of
Yeah, I
times
can
at
see you
Opera
doing
Fort
that.
Collins, but really, I love Rossini's manic music anyway. And Figaro, But I'm kind of with Scott and Brandy. I just wait for something to come along that's suitable, will fit. There's one that I love the movie and I love the play. I'd really like to take a stab at Sir Wilfrid in Witness for the Prosecution that Scott played. Yeah, or the prosecutor that Tom played.
That Tom played.
Yeah. But not the High Court judge that I played.
Well, I don't know.
So
Sitting
talking-
up there with the big sword,
I know, that was
pretty cool.
amazing, wasn't it? That was amazing. So, how do you choose the next role that you actually want to try and get into? Because between Fort Collins and Denver, we have got some exceedingly good community theatre groups, and we've got some that aren't quite so good. So, how do you actually make a decision that I want to go there? Okay, it's going to be a 45-minute drive each way, but I still want to go there. How do you make these decisions? Is it something that just grabs you?
I think it's a lot of different things that come into play, and if everything lines up, if the drive, if the role, if the people that you're going to work with, the company that you're going to work with, if that time in your life, a lot of times I've not been able to do something because there's too many family things going on, or a trip or something like that you have to take off. So for me, it's a lot of different things that come into play.
Right. Actually, Brandy?
I agree with Beth. I think it kind of all ties together. I think once you get into the community, it is such an incestuous community that you start to learn directors and people and are connected with them, especially with things like Facebook and that, and you find out about shows and who's doing what. And I have just recently started reading the scripts more before I'll audition for them, because it is such a time commitment. I have 2 young children at home and a full-time career, and so I do, not that I've ever had a bad role again, luckily, but you hear those horror stories, so I do want to make sure the script is something that I'm willing to give up 2 to 3 months of my life and my family's life. It's stressful rushing from work to rehearsal to home and
Yes.
stuff, so you do have to make sure that it's worth that.
Right. Scott?
All of those same factors, the drive, the availability of time, the size of the role, and those things. And also, something that comes into play for me is the venue. I've performed at some very beautiful venues, the Sangre de Cristo Arts Center in Pueblo, and the Rialto Theater in Loveland, and the Longmont Performing Arts Center, and some fantastic places to perform. I've always wanted to perform at the Lincoln Center in Fort Collins. So if I see that there's a show coming up there, I might just go audition for it just to get a chance to play on that stage. So that has a little bit to do with it, but it does have a lot to do with do I have the time? Is it worth the drive for me to go out? Do I really want to drive out to this audition and get rejected again by this same director or this? So that has to do with it. You don't always get to pick your roles, so sometimes it's just a question of what they will offer you, and you audition for everything, everywhere, and take what you can get.
Right. Rick?
Well, I'm in all of the above camp. I think that, a lot of, there's been several times when I thought, well, I'd really like to work with that director, or, the theater company. You mentioned the Lincoln Center, and in the 2 operas I've been in the chorus, we're on the main stage at the Lincoln Center. We walk out an 1,800 seat house, and we're like, wow, this is cool, So, but it's 40 minutes up to Fort Collins. Do you want to really do that 5 nights a week, 4 nights a week, and that sort of thing? So all that kind of comes into play, and at the same time, perhaps you've heard some bad rumblings about a certain director, and that has run me off a couple of auditions in the past as well. So all the things, us being community theater thespians, for the most part, we're not getting paid. And gasoline becomes a real outlay, and time at home if you've got kids or
Babysitters.
There is a tip here worth knowing, that when you're doing a show that's a long distance away, like if we were doing a show in Fort Collins, providing they are a registered charity, you can claim your mileage off your income tax.
Oh, 501c3?
501c3.
So that's Bob Blue, open stage.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I didn't know
That is a valid claim.
Can I retroactively?
How many years of tax returns need to be redone?
When I was doing the radio show up in Fort Collins, so every Saturday I was driving to and from Fort Collins, and every year at the end of the year, that came a business expense or a charitable expense.
Well, I didn't know that.
Oh, absolutely.
That either.
No.
Does
Absolutely.
that count for Longmont Theater?
Yes.
Even also?
Yes, you know, these are the kind of things that you don't hear about until it's too late.
Right.
And I should have mentioned this earlier, probably on this show, but yes, absolutely, you are working with a charity.
Interesting.
So,
Right,
yes.
and that's, you know, like LTC, Bob Blue, whatever, that wouldn't be Union Colony Dinner Theater, Carousel,
Right.
Right.
Candlelight, because those are
Well,
not.
They might be business expenses, though. If you're making your living there, then you can write off.
That's true. I guess a
Yes.
different kind of write-off,
Yeah.
you know.
Probably what I should do is do some research into this and probably just have a program on, you know, what you really need to do. But I want to talk a little bit here because actually it fits in very nicely with what you've all said about how do you pick a show. We spend hours and hours and hours rehearsing a show. We spend weekends building sets. We then spend weekends performing the show. And typically with a drama comedy, we're probably talking of 2 to 2.5 months commitment. And then for a musical, we're probably talking of 3 to 3.5 months commitment. Does this ever have an effect on your home life? And if it does, how do you cope with that? Or do you have partners, etc., that really understand what you're up to? Anyone want to grab this?
Well, yeah. I am lucky enough to be married to an actor, and we met during doing a play, and so we've always allowed one another to go off and do, 2-3 months. Raising our kids in that was I think a great thing. I hope that they appreciate the exposure that they got to all different kinds of people that we may not have come into contact with otherwise, and just being it kind of is a family activity. A lot of times you can bring your kids to rehearsal or bring them to build sets, and they're there for opening night, so it's like you kind of get to treat yourself, but you're also bringing your family into it. So it always worked really well for us.
Excellent. Ever have a role that bled into your personal life?
I think my last role with Longmont Theater Company kind of bled into my personal life, and that I was really stressed out about making sure that I brought the right performance to the stage, and yeah, I did. I kind of brought that home, and it went into my life maybe a little too much.
Yes.
So.
Scott?
All the time, every role.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay. And
No, every role I do bleeds into my personal life. I find myself saying things that my character would say at home, at work, or whatever. And if it's a happy, funny character, then I'm a happy, funny guy at work. And if it's a dark, morose, or angry person, then I start to get a little that way at work too.
Wow.
So yeah, it always affects me until it's over. It doesn't stay with me permanently.
Right.
But I do
Right.
find myself in character sometimes
Okay.
during the
What
day.
about the amount of time that we spend putting shows together? Has that ever affected your personal life, or?
Well, not really, because I'm single and I have roommates, and they're very supportive of my theater endeavors. As a matter of fact, they think it's great living with an actor, and they get to come and see me in shows, and
Nice.
so it's all good. But it does, you start missing home after a while when you feel like you've spent all of your nights away for a month. You just want to spend a night at home or two, have a dinner with the people that you live with, and
Yes.
just be back to normal.
Yes.
Until you're ready to do the next show, and then yeah, you
Right.
want to go back.
You want to go and do it again?
Yeah.
Andy?
I agree. My husband is not in the theater, but he is, like we talked about the last
Yes.
show, that the one that encouraged me to start auditioning and going for it. So he does have to help out a lot with the two young ones. It is nice to finally go into production, so you're home most nights. But I think it is important to show them that you have hobbies and things outside of home that you
Right.
enjoy to do. I know my one son is now old enough that he comes to all my shows and enjoys it and always asks about the role and that. So I think that's really nice exposure. The only role that I've had that really, and I didn't expect this for myself, was The Women of Lockerbie. I played part of the chorus, and it was about the plane that was blown up by
Yes.
terrorists over Ireland and the debris that fell down.
Scotland.
I'm sorry. Scotland.
What is it with
They're
you
all the same
Americans
to
and
us.
geography?
Ireland,
area.
Scotland, it's
Islands
all
over
the
there.
same.
Exactly. Scotland, excuse me. And the debris that fell down, and the women collecting that debris to get it back to the
Yes.
loved ones. And I didn't expect to be that actor that got so into the role that you took it home, but it was a bit to let go of that every night, because like you said, you're on stage the whole time thinking about these people that died. There were babies, there were
Yeah.
children,
Oh, yeah.
mothers, fathers. So that did start to bleed over a little bit, and then it was the first time I felt like I had to kind of, the commute back and forth to rehearsal was nice because I could
It gives you a
reset
chance.
before
Yes.
I got home to my little ones and that. So.
Yes. Rick, what about
Yes. What was the question?
What's the difference between Ireland and Scotland?
Oh, that. I thought we went over that. You know, it's a giant commitment to really do something in one of these theater productions, like you were saying, 3.5 months. You're a musical, you start out the first 3 or 4 weeks, you're going to go to music rehearsals, and then you're going to get into regular rehearsals. My wife has always been very understanding about that. Before I got into theater, I was singing rock and roll. Geez, and we would play with the one band, or we'd rehearse with the one band 3 nights a week. So, you know, it really kind of
Yeah.
transitioned into that.
Ever had a role that just stuck with you? You could not shake it when you left the theater?
You know, not really. I mean, as far as really bleeding into my personal life, that reporter in the Raft of Medusa, I would, like I said, we'd finish and I'd go backstage and just kind of try and wash it off, if you will. Kind of the reverse of it's 10 minutes to curtain and you find a secluded spot backstage and apply it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Become the character is like, unbecome it. But I have driven people at work, talking in dialect as best I can. Knock it off with the British accent. It's a dialect, it's not an accent. Or singing songs over and over,
Right.
Let me tell you the tale of a gambling man, the roughest and toughest of all. But, generally, one of the things I really like about the theater is you can get there and shake off the rest of your problems, the rest of your life, and you can be somebody else. And I've never really had a problem leaving all that in the theater.
Right.
So
Yeah, I'm exactly the same way. Exactly the same way. So that's good. So I'll tell you what, why don't we end with a bit of trivia? It's a single trivia question, and we'll see how many of you know the answer. Henry Fonda, one of the most brilliant American actors ever, did one role that he considered to be the role that he enjoyed doing the most. I'll give you a clue. It was in a movie that was 2.5 hours long, and he was on screen for about 16 to 20 minutes. What was the movie? I'll give you another clue, but it's not this movie. Now I can't whistle.
The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
That's a clue.
He was in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Nope.
No?
But
No.
it was a Western.
Who directed it?
John
Hughes
Ford?
Or John Ford.
No.
No.
Sergio Leone.
He directed the movie I'm thinking of with Henry Fonda.
It's not Once Upon a Time in the West?
I thought you were going to say Clarence Darrow, because he did a one-man show of Clarence Darrow that was phenomenal.
Yes.
And he was the only one on stage.
Yeah.
When you said he was only on stage for 16 minutes, then
Yeah. He enjoyed the role so much because he got to play pure evil.
Evil.
And it was the role he enjoyed doing the most. It wasn't even a deep role. But the opening shot is from his waist down, and you see him drawing the gun and shooting a kid. That's his opening shot in this movie. And then it slowly pans up to his face. Brilliant. Yeah. Beth, Scott, Brandy, Rick, thank you so much for joining us down here in the Captain's Lounge studios. I think we have a show. My guests have been absolutely brilliant as ever. And this is the Captain's Lounge studios. Your host, Nigel Aves, signing off. Thank you for watching.